Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Luna Nozawa sat in her little apartment across town, the dull light from a single lamp spreading long shadows across the room. Her hands were firmly clenched in her lap, her fingers twisting together as if she were attempting to grab onto something going away. Bill's remarks struck her like a physical blow, each syllable a reminder of her faults. She'd been careless, trusting the wrong people and making decisions that spun out of her control. She had believed she could manage the corporate games at Spencer Publications, that she could prove herself to Bill, the guy who had given her a chance when no one else would. But now that chance had passed. She'd abused his trust, and the look in his eyes, disappointment tinged with something deeper, almost betrayal, haunted her. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. Crying would not solve the problem. Nothing could. Finn Finnegan walked the living room of his house, his footfall muffled by the luxurious carpet, yet weighted with concern. He ran his fingers through his hair, his thoughts racing on how to break the news to his wife, Steffi. Luna's actions had upset the delicate equilibrium of their universe, and Finn knew Steffi would be enraged when she found out the truth. Luna was like a sister to Steffi, a confidant in the turbulent world of Forrester Creations. However, Luna's decisions have spread outward, threatening to destabilize everything. Finn paused pacing and leaned against the wall, his heart aching. He didn't want to be the one to inform Steffi, to see her face collapse as she realized someone she cared about had betrayed her. However, he had no choice. The truth was about to be revealed, and it would be devastating for everyone. Katie Logan sat at her kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her head was still reeling from what she'd discovered. She was always smart, piecing together signs that others missed, but this was different. Luna's treachery was more than just a business blunder. It was emotional, a wound that struck deep into the fabric of their lives. Katie had trusted Luna, seeing her as a brilliant young woman capable of rising above the harsh environment they all lived in. But the evidence was clear. Luna had been working behind their backs, passing information to a competing company. Katie was shocked not just by the treachery, but also by how she had misunderstood someone she thought she knew. She glanced at her phone, trying to decide whether to call Bill. Katie wondered if he was as hurt as she was. The narrative began several months ago, when Luna first joined Spencer Publications. She was young and ambitious, with a subtle intensity that piqued Bill's interest. He sensed something in her, a spark, a desire to prove herself. He'd taken her under his wing, training her and assigning her responsibilities that most interns could only dream of. Luna took it all in, her gratitude apparent and her determination ardent. But behind her determination was a vulnerability she kept hidden, a fear of disappointing people who believed in her. That dread had prompted her to make a disastrous decision, accept an offer from a competitor, a shadowy man who promised her the world in exchange for information about Spencer's next big move. Luna initially convinced herself that it was nothing serious, only minor details, nothing that would harm Bill or the company. However, the pressures increased, as did the lies she told herself to excuse her behavior. She didn't realize the web she was creating until it was too late, when a competitor used her knowledge to undercut Spencer Publications in a deal that cost the company millions of dollars. When Bill discovered the truth, he reacted quickly and mercilessly. He summoned Luna to his office, his voice quiet and controlled, but his eyes blazed with a rage she had never seen. "You had my trust," he explained. "You threw it away. There is no second chance here, Luna. You're done." Luna had tried to explain and beg forgiveness, but Bill's face was stone. She exited his office with her head low, the weight of her faults crushing her. She'd lost more than just her career. She'd also lost the respect of a guy she admired, a man who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Now, alone in her apartment, she pondered whether she would ever find a way to redeem herself. The city beyond her window was a flurry of rain and lights, reminding her of how insignificant she felt in its enormity. Finn, meantime, was dealing with his own predicament. Steffi was at Forrester Creations, working late as usual, unaware of the impending storm. Finn understood how much Luna meant to her. Steffi had championed Luna, bringing her into the Forrester fold and vouching for her when others were skeptical. The notion of informing Steffi that Luna had betrayed them all made Finn's stomach turn. He could imagine her reaction, the astonishment, hurt, and rage that would flash in her eyes. Steffi didn't forgive easy, and Finn was afraid this would shatter something in her that he couldn't heal. He took up his phone and set it down again. He wanted to shield Steffi from the anguish, but he knew it was impossible. The truth was a tidal wave, and it was coming whether he was prepared or not. He thought about Luna, the girl he'd known, bright, gentle, and slightly lost. He couldn't reconcile that image with the one Bill had created of a traitor who had sold them out. Finn wondered whether there was more to the narrative that Luna wasn't telling. But even if there were, would it matter? Bill's decision was definitive, and Steffi would never see Luna the same way again. Katie, too, was dealing with her own questions. She had always prided herself on her intuition and ability to read people. But Luna had crept through her defenses, enchanting her with her quiet power and drive. Katie saw her as a younger version of herself, struggling to find their place in a world that didn't always accommodate them. Now that image has been shattered. Katie recalled the moment she discovered the truth, combing over paperwork late at night, spotting inconsistencies that led her to Luna's emails. The understanding struck her like a punch, leaving her breathless. She'd gone to Bill right away, hoping she was mistaken, but the proof was undeniable. Katie felt guilty as she sat in her quiet kitchen. Had she been too hasty to judge Luna? Could there have been a reason, a pressure they didn't recognize? But then she remembered Bill and the pain in his voice when he told her about his fight with Luna. Bill was more than just angry. He was also sincerely and personally hurt. Katie recognized that type of pain did not stem from a simple corporate betrayal. Bill cared about Luna and saw her as more than an employee. And now that trust had vanished, creating a gap that Katie wasn't sure anyone could fill. As the rain continued to fall, the four of them were united by their common anguish, each dealing with the consequences of Luna's deeds. Bill stood alone in his office, the bourbon unfinished, his thoughts replaying every hour he'd spent tutoring Luna, wondering where he'd gone wrong. Luna sat in her flat, staring at a gloomy and uncertain future, her hopes of achievement now shattered. Finn paced, dreading the moment when he had to confront Steffi with the truth, knowing it would change everything. Katie, her coffee cold, pondered whether trust could ever be restored after it had been destroyed. The city continued on without them, unconcerned with their anguish. However, for Bill, Luna, Finn, and Katie, the world had changed, leaving them to navigate a new reality in which second chances were a luxury that none of them could afford. Luna's infidelity had left scars on everyone who had believed in her, and as the rain fell, it appeared to wash away any chance of atonement, leaving just the anguish of what could have been. Luna had walked into his life like a bright spark, full of promise and vitality, and he had hoped she could bring light where darkness had once existed. But once damaged, trust was difficult to rebuild. He'd built civilizations and brought them down with his bare hands, but betrayal from within his own circle? That was something he could not ignore. When he finally turned away from the window, his gaze was cold steel. His voice, when he spoke, was low but sharp. "You have no more opportunities, Luna. You've made your choice, and I am making mine." Across town, Luna remained transfixed, her mind racing with terror and shame. She knew what was coming. She'd seen that look in Bill's eyes before, one that suggested there was no more forgiveness. She made a mistake that spiraled out of control, and every attempt to correct it only seemed to get her deeper into trouble. Her heart beat as she thought about Finn, her secret confidant. He had listened when no one else would, and comforted her when she couldn't handle the weight of her choices. However, Finn was now stuck in the midst of a storm that had the potential to destroy everything. Finn had spent restless nights pacing the floor, attempting to find out how to tell Steffi the truth. Every time he opened his mouth to speak, he saw her face, trusting, loving, and oblivious of the secret he was keeping for Luna. It wasn't an affair in the traditional sense, but it was a different type of betrayal. He had promised Steffi honesty and no more secrets between them. Yet here he was, shielding Luna and concealing something that could upset his marriage to its core. He sat in his hospital office, hands clutched tightly together, the weight of his decision bearing down on him. The monitor behind him beeped softly, reminding him of the daily life-or-death decisions he faced. But this personal dilemma felt heavier than anything else in the emergency room. He couldn't stop hearing Bill's voice echo in his head, the threat, the last warning. Bill wasn't lying. When he stated there would be no second chances, he meant it. Luna had no idea how far Bill would go to preserve his family and reputation. Katie was the first to detect the shift. She'd known Bill long enough to recognize the signs, the cutting tone, the frantic pacing, and the strange hush that filled his office before he made a significant move. She'd seen this side of him during their stormy years together, and it always gave her a chill. When she walked into his office unexpectedly and discovered him standing there, fists clenched, she knew something was wrong. "Bill," she asked quietly, edging closer. "What's going on? You've been shutting everyone out again." He did not respond straight away. Instead, he poured himself a drink, the ice clinking on the glass like a warning bell. "I'm done giving people the benefit of the doubt," he grumbled. "Katie, I've been played. Again." Katie frowned. "By whom? Luna?" He looked up, his eyes dark and cruel. Katie froze, saying, "You knew." "I knew nothing, Bill. But I could see the tension, the whispers, the way you've been looking at her recently. What happened?" "She crossed the line," he stated coldly. "And now she's going to find out what happens when you lie to me." Katie's heart sinks. She remembered how deeply Bill would cut when he felt deceived. She had been on both sides of his wrath, soothing him and confronting it. She also knew Luna was not evil. She was young, torn between devotion and love, and trapped by circumstances she didn't control. But try saying that to Bill Spencer, who had already made up his mind. Meanwhile, Luna was desperate. She had gone to Finn's office expecting for counsel, someone to help her find a way to contact Bill before he acted out of rage. Finn listened silently, divided between empathy and horror. "Luna," he finally concluded, "you cannot keep hiding this. Bill isn't the type of man to let things go. If you want to fix this, you have to face him." Her voice quivered. "I tried, Finn. He will not listen. He treated me like a stranger." Finn sighed and rubbed his brow. "I know what that's like," he said softly. "Once Bill decides someone has betrayed him, it is nearly impossible to change his mind." Luna's eyes welled up with tears. "What should I do? He warned me that I would regret crossing him. I believe he means it." Finn turned away. "He does." At that point, the door opened and Steffi emerged. Finn could tell from the look on her face that she had overheard at least some of their talk. "What does he mean exactly, Finn?" she asked, folding her arms. Luna sprang to her feet. "Steffi, her eyes furrowed. "Luna, what are you doing here?" "I thought you were taking a break." "I needed to talk to Finn," Luna mumbled. Finn stood up, attempting to ease the strain. "It's not as you think, Steffi." Steffi softened her expression but remained suspicious. The words hung there for a second, floating and frail. Electra frowned. "What do you mean by it's over?" Bridget lifted her head, her lips trembling, but her eyes were filled with relief, or possibly astonishment. She slowly unfolded the paper and held it up. "The results. They're here, and it's over. We finally know." Everyone stood still for a time. Will moved closer, his breath unsteady. "Are you serious?" he inquired, his voice husky. "Have you got them?" Bridget nodded. "I received the call this morning. I didn't want to open them until everyone arrived." Katie's hand moved to her mouth. Her gaze flickered between Bridget and the paper, and her body trembled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Just tell us," she whispered. "Please. I can't handle it any longer." Bridget looked down at the paper once again. Her gaze scanned the printed sentences, which she had previously read 3 times in the kitchen before anyone arrived. She couldn't quite believe it. She gulped hard and took a long breath. It says. She halted, her voice caught. It says that Will is the father. The room fell silent for a time. Then everything broke at once. Electra gasped, bringing her palm to her chest. Katie let out a piercing shriek, which evolved into a sob. Will staggered backward, his mouth open in amazement, his hands reaching for his face. He made a sound that fell somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Bridget, still holding the paper, felt tears stream down her cheeks, tears she had no idea she was holding back. The weight she had been carrying for months, if not years, was suddenly lifted, leaving her faint and lightheaded. Will crossed the room in 2 steps and grabbed her in his arms. "Oh my God, Bridget," he said softly into her hair. I believed it couldn't be true. I felt I'd lost everything." Bridget clutched to him, sobbing quietly. "It's real," she said quietly. "It's finally real." Behind them, Katie rose up, wiping her tears and trembling. She gazed at them with an odd combination of happiness and disbelief. "After all this time," she added softly, "after all the fighting, doubts, and sleepless nights, it's finally over." Electra turned away and buried her face in her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were red, and her demeanor was gentler than normal. "I didn't think we'd ever get to this point," she admitted quietly. "A part of me didn't want to believe it, you know, because believing meant risking hope again." Bridget took a step back from Will and looked at each of them individually. "I know," she replied kindly. "However, we can stop running now. We can stop doubting." The room was filled with quiet crying, and laughter broke through the tears. For months, if not years, their lives had been entangled in a web of misunderstanding, secrets, and suffering. It had begun with a question, one that everyone had been too terrified to answer. When Bridget discovered she was pregnant, there were too many shadows in her life, too many whispered truths. The DNA test had become both a blessing and a curse, promising truth, but threatening to ruin them. Will was distant back then. He had fled, unable to bear the uncertainty. His sister, Electra, had blamed Bridget for everything, accusing her of lying and manipulating the family. Bridget's best friend, Katie, had tried to remain neutral, but she, too, experienced moments of doubt. Every conversation had become a war. Every gathering had ended with tears. Bridget had lost sleep, food, and faith in herself. The test had taken weeks, but the wait had felt like forever. As she stood there, holding the outcome in her hands, everything inside her felt fresh, raw yet new. Will's arms around her felt like a homecoming. Electra slumped back onto the couch, face buried in her hands. "I owe you an apology," she said softly, her voice quivering. "Bridget, I said terrible things to you. I suspected you were lying to protect yourself. I didn't notice how much suffering you were in." Bridget shook her head. "You were scared, Electra." Katie stepped closer, resting her hand on Electra's shoulder. "She's right," Katie whispered softly. "We've all made errors." We'll turn to face them, still holding Bridget's hand. "We were desperate to protect what little we understood." "No one's innocent in this," he added gently. "Least of all me." "I walked away when I should have stayed," Bridget said, her gaze softening. "You came back," she replied simply. "That's what matters." They stood there in silence once more, the kind that only comes after a storm. Outside, the light had changed, with the sun lower and the breeze softening. A breeze blew through the open window, bearing the smell of rain. A child's chuckle could be heard faintly down the street. It felt as if the world had exhaled. Katie stepped up to the table, where the envelope was open and the paper was half folded. She brushed it tenderly with her palm, as if it were sacred. "Are you going to keep it?" she asked Bridget. Bridget nodded. "Yes. It serves as a reminder rather than proof. About what we went through. How far we've come." Will grabbed for her hand again. "We can finally move forward," he said, his tone hard yet gentle. "No more second-guessing.